A question I get a lot during live streams and in comment sections is what category should Apple enter that they currently haven't entered before? They took no one's advice and entered the geo-tracking area with AirTags, but they actually did a pretty dang good job on it, and now I think it's the best one on the market. And I've never made a formal video about this, and I felt like I should because we talk about it a lot, and it's something that I think Apple could really make different and special, and also they'd get a lot of my money if they did it. Let's begin. So yeah, the most common response I'd probably hear from saying Apple should make their own, mirrorless DSLR dedicated camera with interchangeable lenses and a really heavy-duty sensor. Most would just say it's the iPhone, right? Apple is putting so much computational work into making the iPhone camera the best camera possible because, as we all know, the best camera is the camera we have with us, right? Well, at the same time, Apple doesn't seem to film their own events with the best camera then, because all of the keynotes we've watched over the past couple years from Apple have been filmed with dedicated cameras, and Apple didn't put 1.5 terabytes of RAM or a 28-core CPU into the Mac Pro just so it could edit iPhone footage. Apple makes Pro-class Mac applications and Mac Pro hardware because there are cameras out there that are more advanced that take better videos and better pictures than our iPhones can. It's just a simple fact. Our lenses on our iPhones are too small and the sensors are not able to collect enough data to be of a professional grade. For the average consumer, yes, very, very good, and I don't have a personal DSLR that I take on trips or anything. I use my phone for most photo taking and video taking, but I think Apple knows, especially with how many Macs they sell, there's a lot of us using stuff better than our iPhone cameras because there's only so much computational trickery our phones can do. Through artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's able to mask out and create what looks like a depth of field by blurring out the background, but it's ultimately trying to recreate what a camera already does naturally. There's no trickery involved. That's just the image that a camera is able to pull from reality. And a lot of us YouTubers have to use these cameras for work because that's just what's available to us. And these camera companies make a lot of choices when it comes to the software and the lens attachments and the transfer speeds and the user interface that I just think Apple could do significantly better, even if it was super duper expensive. I'm well aware they would probably have their own custom lens mount. Maybe there's an adapter that lets you use micro four thirds or EF lens attachments to the Apple camera, but ultimately it would totally be an Apple move for them to be like, we're going to develop our own custom lenses, our own custom lens attachment. But knowing how much time and energy went into the Pro Display XDR and that Pro stand, I have to imagine they would probably be some of the best lenses out there, and the image quality you could pull out of an Apple camera would likely be really, really high. I mean, they've been selling 5K resolution iMacs for 6 years that were pretty much just built so that you could look at very high resolution photographs. It's not like 5K was a common video supported codec, but it was fairly common with a lot of Canon Rebel cameras shooting at around a 5K resolution. Now iMacs had a display that could output that resolution and you could get a lot of that detail. If Apple was developing their own camera, for one, they could build it into the Find My network, so if you did lose it or misplace it or got lost in some bag, you would be able to track down the exact camera you not just use for occasional selfies and pictures of food you post on Instagram, but you could actually have your work camera or your camera that you bring to weddings because you're a freelance video editor, or maybe you're just a professional photographer and you're going to be taking that camera with you. Making it built into the Find My network would bring a lot of peace of mind knowing you could track it down if something went wrong. And I also think Apple is really, really good at optimizing software to work pretty well with hardware, so they could probably even one-up the Blackmagic cameras that I use and make a very clean, intuitive user interface that gives you all the controls you want out of a DSLR, but also makes it very simple and easy to navigate. I imagine having a very large multi-touch display with a lot of high dynamic range. Heck, even slap an OLED Super Retina panel within that DSLR camera, the same ones they put in their iPhones, because then you'd be able to appreciate all of the HDR photography features and all of the detail you can take out of those pictures or videos and play them them back right off the camera itself. And a lot of the time, what decides a camera from being able to record at a certain frame rate or at a certain resolution is how fast the CPU is within that camera. How quickly can it write a digital file? And Apple designed some of the most powerful and power efficient chips in the world. If Apple was designing their own silicon, whether it's the M1 chip, if they want to make it that overkill, or they just want to give it an iPhone chip like the A15 and put it into a camera, it could write at extremely high speeds and not consume much power. That way you could have, you know, extremely high resolution, 4K resolution or more, that's also recording at 60 frames a second, 120 frames a second, 240 frames a second, and you'd get way cleaner, way better slow-mo shots or just buttery smooth shots than you could ever get with your iPhone, because that is working with a tiny lens and a tiny sensor, whereas an Apple camera with interchangeable lenses and telephoto options, ultra-wide options, macro options, you could capture stuff that your iPhone could never even dream of capturing. But at the same time, I know Apple's just going to be saying, well, we just need to work on getting the iPhone better. But if that was the case, then I don't quite understand why Apple is planning on bringing back the SD card slot for their high-end MacBook Pros, or why Apple is not filming their own events or own commercials with iPhones. I know occasionally they do the shot on iPhone thing, but whenever they do it, they make a big point about it because it's supposed to be impressive. Like, wow, okay, you shot an ad with your iPhone. That's impressive. But whenever they don't say that, you know, they're using their own custom gear, probably tens of thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment, because an iPhone, some of the times, is just not going to cut it for certain professionals. And in the same way, I totally understand why Apple makes the MacBook Air with the M1 chip, and it's really powerful and it can cover the basics for average consumers. But Apple also makes high-end iMacs and Mac Pros for people who want more performance and more power. And they're going to be using very heavy-duty cameras and editing that HDR high-resolution footage, and they need something a lot more powerful than a MacBook Air to do that. So as long as Apple's going to have lots of different options in the Mac lineup, some people don't need much power, but they're still going to offer the options for those who do want a lot more computational performance, then to me it makes sense to be like, yeah, okay, for the general point-and-shoot camera, the iPhone is fine, but there are some of us out there that want a little bit more, that want more customization, that want more settings than the iPhone is willing to offer us. And imagining Apple developing their own DSLR with a full-frame sensor and everything, but you could also build AirDrop right into it, I feel like this would be an absolute godsend for photographers out there, right? Because the iPad Pro is great for artists and it's great for photo editing and color calibration with all the software available on iPadOS. It may never get macOS like I want, but if you had a dedicated DSLR that you could take really, really high resolution pictures with great dynamic range, and Apple could bake in a lot of that deep fusion technology they've borrowed from the iPhone, and then after you take these super high resolution photos, you can instantly AirDrop them to your iPad or to your MacBook if you're on the go, and show your clients or just show the people you're with, hey, here's the picture, here's the shots I got on a larger display, and you could edit it right off the iPad. And I can kind of get the fundamental vision of Apple just saying, no, we're just going to make iPhone cameras and iPad cameras so good that we won't need DSLRs anymore. But because Apple's doing things like bringing back the SD card slot in the next MacBook, and Apple clearly is not willing to film their own events or broadcast their own keynotes with their own iPhone cameras, they have to borrow Sony cameras or Nikon or Canon or whoever they want to use for these events. That to me is evidence that there are certain things you cannot trick with software. There are certain things that a chip and software are never going to be able to recreate compared to what an actual lens and an actual sensor can actually come up with. Because as smartphone cameras get better and better, so do those pro class Hollywood level cameras that can create amazing color science and amazing amount of detail out of a fully fledged camera, not something that's trying to be miniaturized into the top section of an iPhone. That's always going to be fundamentally limited in my mind, and that's why I don't film my videos on iPhones or iPads. And I do expect iPhones and iPads to get better, but I think the regular standard studio cameras will get better too. And simply having a way for me to film my videos that I record all the time and wirelessly send them to my Mac so I can start editing with them, that would be immensely more helpful than having to deal with stupid SD cards or CFast cards all the time, because I think it feels very dated that we have to store our digital files on these tiny SSDs that get lost and get damaged. Gotta pull them out of the camera, gotta stick them into the computer, and because Apple decided SD card slot wasn't necessary anymore, now we gotta buy an adapter. But now they decided the SD card slot is kind of useful, so now we're going back to SD card slots, but I still gotta get an adapter because I record to CFast cards. Plus you could do what I'm doing right now and have the Apple camera plugged directly into your Mac via Thunderbolt world and turn it into the best FaceTime webcam you could possibly imagine. And just because I think Macs and Mac OS in general are very common in the video production industry, especially with YouTubers, a lot of people buying cameras and computers to go with them. Most of the time, those end up being Apple computers. It makes sense that Apple would provide the most common accessory for a lot of us, which is a camera that's substantially better than what our iPhone can produce. So there's no leak, there's no rumor saying this is what Apple's doing or this is what Apple's gonna do, but there were enough people talking about it over the years. I thought I would put it on the record and say Apple designed software that's running on a camera that's part of the Find My network that supports AirDrop, and thanks to the incredible performance of Apple Silicon, you could have really high frame rates and really seamless preview monitoring through that camera. I know it would be expensive and it would probably cost a lot, but it would likely be a very popular option among creators and something that I think Apple could disrupt just as well as they disrupt the geotag tracking industry with AirTags. I think making their own dedicated cameras would be an amazing thing that I would love to see them do, and I would buy it myself and probably be willing to spend an unhealthy amount of money on it. So I know it's different than my normal videos, but I was waiting for kind of a slow day to talk about this. But I'm curious, what product category that Apple is not currently in would you like to see them enter and why? Feel free to let me know. This is your Apple Sheep here. See you guys in the next one.